The American Civil War is the defining event in the history of the United States. After fighting from April 1861 until April 1865, the Southern Confederate States lay down their arms to the Northern United States. More than 600,000 people are killed. Based on the current population, that number today is equivalent to 6 million deaths. The Battle of Gettysburg occurs in the middle of the war, on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1863. It is often called the turning point of the war, yet it did not end the war. It is both the largest and the bloodiest battle of the war, with 165,000 men engaged and 51,000 casualties, killed, wounded, and missing. Gettysburg is the closest the Confederacy comes to winning the war. 4 months after the battle, President Abraham Lincoln delivers the Gettysburg Address here at the Soldiers' National Cemetery.
Go Lincoln!
Now considered the nation's most famous speech, Lincoln's 272 words redefine America. When the Civil War ends a year and a half later, slavery is abolished. And in the decades that follow, the United States becomes the most powerful nation on earth. Before the war, it was said, the United States are. After the war, it becomes, the United States is. At the center of this conflict is President Abraham Lincoln. His election to the presidency in 1860 on an anti-slavery platform leads to the secession of 11 southern states and the founding of a new nation, the Confederate States of America. The war begins in April 1861, when the Confederates fire on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. Both sides expect the war to end quickly. Lincoln believes the 75,000 men he calls to serve for 3 months will be sufficient to put down the rebellion. He is wrong. 2 years later, in the summer of 1863, there will be 51,000 casualties here at Gettysburg alone. While the war is fought throughout the country, what happens in the East gets the most press and affects the popular sentiment. In the East, Confederates are winning the war, battle after battle after battle. The largest of the Union armies, the Army of the Potomac, is consistently beaten by the most important Confederate army, the Army of Northern Virginia. These two armies will meet at Gettysburg. As a young man, Abraham Lincoln first gains national attention by opposing war. Now he is a war president. Lincoln struggles for 2 years to find a capable general to lead his army. His commanders prove too old, overcautious, overconfident, or incompetent. By June 1863, the Union Army has fought 5 battles and has not won a major victory. Each time the commanding general is fired. Generals fear Abraham Lincoln. He is a representative of a budding capitalistic culture based on hard competition. Those who win advance. Lose, and you're out. In Lincoln's system, good people are lost along the way. But by the end, he ends up with the finest Union generals, and they win the war in 1865. But in June 1863, it seems no one can beat Robert E. Lee. In the most recent battle, Chancellorsville, in May, the Union Army's 130,000 men are defeated by Lee's 60,000. Lee wins a great victory, but loses his right-hand man, the great General Stonewall Jackson. Jackson dies after being wounded accidentally by his own men. Lee will now have to fight on without Stonewall Jackson. Lee is still confident in his army. There never were such men in an army before. They will go anywhere and do anything if properly led, he says. But he knows the odds are against the Confederacy. The South has a much smaller population, far less industry, poor transportation, and several southern states, especially Virginia, have been devastated by 2 years of continuous fighting. The longer the war goes on, the better chance the North will have to win by simply wearing down the South. So Lee hatches a plan to end the war. He will take his army into Northern Territory, into Pennsylvania, both to relieve Virginia of the burden of the war and to destroy the Union Army in its own territory. Then, he believes, foreign powers will recognize the Confederacy. The Northerners will be so sick of war, they will pressure Lincoln to put an end to it. The Confederates will win the war and their independence. The Confederate government prepares an important letter offering peace. It will be placed on Abraham Lincoln's desk on the day after Lee destroys the Union Army in Northern Territory. Lee's men move out of Virginia, across the Potomac River, through Maryland into Pennsylvania. Here they are stunned by the richness of the land. Lee's orders prohibit looting. His men are to pay with worthless Confederate money. But after 2 years of scrounging around Virginia's ravaged countryside, and sometimes in retaliation for the Union's treatment of the South, the rebels take food, livestock, and liquor from the citizens of Pennsylvania. The Confederates also capture African American people, escaped slaves, and free blacks, who they will take south and sell into slavery for a profit. Terrorized blacks flee the area. While Lee marches his Confederate army into Pennsylvania, the Union command is in chaos. Generals are bickering, engulfed in political turmoil. Lincoln is still searching for a general who can beat Lee. On June 28th, in Frederick, Maryland, Union General George Meade, who is feuding with his commanding general, is awakened at 3 a.m. A colonel from Washington has come to see him. Half asleep, Meade stumbles out of his tent, thinking he's under arrest. As the officer begins to speak, Meade blurts out, "My conscience is clear." But Meade is not under arrest. He is now in command of the largest army of the United States, and Lee is on Northern soil. Meade has never commanded much more than 10,000 soldiers. Now he commands almost 10 times that number. Meade is from Pennsylvania, and Lincoln, who expects a major battle there, predicts he will fight well on his own dunghill. Exactly 3 days later, Meade will lead the Union Army into the greatest battle ever fought in the Western Hemisphere. As the two large armies spread out over the countryside, they look to consolidate their forces via roads. The 10 roads leading into Gettysburg, like spokes on a wheel, make it strategically important. In 1863, Gettysburg is a bustling town of 2,400 people. It is the county seat, has a thriving carriage industry, and is a center of learning with both a Lutheran seminary and a college. In the last week of June, a small number of rebels loot the town. Townspeople are in a frenzy as more rebels draw closer. Merchants send their goods east. Black people flee. On the south side of Gettysburg, on the slopes of Cemetery Ridge, a free black farmer named Abraham Bryan leaves his home, a white-framed house and barn he purchased on Cemetery Ridge just a few years earlier. In the days ahead, his property will see crucial action. Local Gettysburg schoolteacher Sally Myers writes in her diary, "Rebel campfires can be seen in the mountains. We may expect a battle both near and soon. May God help us, for surely our cause is one of justice and humanity." Meanwhile, Lee, unsure of his surroundings, moves his men through Pennsylvania. His cavalry, under the command of Jeb Stuart, is on a raid, far from Lee's main army. Without Stuart to scout the Union position, Lee blindly makes his way through enemy territory. The rebel army is spread out, some nearly reaching the Pennsylvania state capital, Harrisburg, others still in Maryland. Lee does not know that there is a new Union commander racing to catch up with his rebel army. That new Union commander is formulating a plan to protect Washington and supply lines and take high ground that forces Lee to attack the Union army.